Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today I shall be doing a Blu-ray and DVD update for March/April of 2022. So let's begin with the Blu-ray, starting off with Spider-Man No Way Home, which is a film that I did, funnily enough, pre-order. Not really the usual thing I would do for an MCU movie, but this was certainly an exception. I really thoroughly enjoyed what this brought to the table. I saw this in the cinema with a close friend of mine, and we absolutely loved it for what it was. Honestly, the main draw for me personally was the villains of past Spider-Man incarnations, which honestly I think was the main sort of point of view across the board, especially with the rumor as to whether or not Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield would have featured in this film. And there was certainly a lot of surprise behind what this film had to offer, and I was very impressed with what really was culminated together from nearly 2 decades worth of Spider-Man cinematic content. And that's really where a lot of the focus, in my honest opinion, seemed to go in terms of what the story had to offer. Storyline-wise, kind of bare bones in a lot of instances, but the villains really did carry this movie for me personally, especially Willem Dafoe portraying the Green Goblin. This incarnation of the Goblin is surprisingly just as dark as what Sam Raimi had to offer in the first Spider-Man film from the early 2000s, so I was very impressed that they managed to keep that consistent. And my personal favorite aspect of this film really was Alfred Molina as Doc Ock. I really enjoyed what he brought to the table, one as an actor, but also how they actually managed to incorporate his character so heavily into the story without him being too involved. I thought that was quite nifty. Obviously, the trailers kind of spoiled a lot of what that had to offer, but regardless, the final product is definitely worth checking out. If you're a fan of the MCU or really the Spider-Man character, there's a lot to offer from this film and something that I would highly recommend checking out. Next up, we have the complete first and second seasons of Final Space, which was a very short-lived animated sci-fi series. I was very disappointed to hear this show got cancelled after season 3, with how impressive both seasons 1 and 2 were overall, mainly season 1 for the storytelling techniques, since the series was overall very consistent with an overlapping story across the 10 episodes. And I really loved the cold openings to each episode with our main protagonist, Gary Goodspeed, kind of struggling, drifting in outer space with literally everyone around him appearing to have been killed. And that was, funnily enough, the ending to the last episode of this first season. So, what we were seeing as an intro to the previous 9 episodes was literally hinting at what was yet to come in terms of the events of the story, which I found to be very dark in some instances, but overall was a great hook to really intrigue you to carry on watching the series. So I really appreciated that throughout the first season, which introduced us to the main characters. And then season 2 was all the more interesting for really progressing those characters and changing them to almost unrecognizable states, such as one of my favorite characters being the ship's AI known as Hugh, who begins as an artificial intelligence computer inside the spaceship and then actually gains a body in the second season, which made him all the more adorable. Surprisingly, there's a lot to really appreciate about what this show managed to accomplish in such a short amount of time, and the third season is no exception, which I'm currently working my way through, and I've enjoyed it a lot thus far. This series, I'm really surprised to see that it got cancelled so quickly. Supposedly, the show's creator, Olin Rogers, had quite a large plan in mind, with a finale mapped out as well, taking the show to 6 seasons. So for this show to basically be half done almost, I'm really surprised that this show hasn't been resurrected as of yet. The series got cancelled in 2021, so I would like to think there is still time. But overall, a great sci-fi animation merged with an interesting romance story between the main character of Gary and his love interest, Quinn, which was really the sort of bare-bones kind of story behind all the science fiction madness. So definitely a series I'd recommend. Some great characters and memorable moments throughout. Next up, we have another Blu-ray set from the folks over at Warner Archive, and that is Season 1 and Season 2 of DC's Harley Quinn. A very interesting reinvention of the Harley Quinn character, with this series essentially looking as though it's been inspired by the likes of Batman the Animated Series, but is very much an adult-themed show, and that made it all the more surreal with how it managed to not only reinvent the character of Harley Quinn, but give some very prominent screen time to some lesser known villain characters that have definitely become a mainstay thanks to a show such as this. And with Harley Quinn now separated from the Joker after an abusive relationship spiraling out of control, she reinvents herself as a person, but really does become quite the unique villain slash anti hero throughout. And that really did take me by surprise, especially with her relationship getting all the more strong with Poison Ivy, along with the various hilarious sort of sidekick characters seen in King Shark, Dr. Psycho, and Clayface. And with this strange amalgamation of characters brought together, it surprisingly works out really well. And for such a strange animated comedy, the delivery of those characters, huge props to the voice actors involved. I particularly love Alan Tudyk in particular as the Joker. Not really something I would have expected from Tudyk, looking at his previous sort of acting experience, but it's a great take on the character, and a standout for me personally was the Scarecrow as well, having various cameos throughout the first season mainly. There's a lot to offer with this show, taking DC characters that are perhaps not considered to be main characters and giving them life outside of what they would perhaps have as really just a main antagonist role in a movie. And that's what I loved about this show. It really did bring things home with certain characters and made it all the more lovable as an animated show. And I cannot wait to see how things progress with the third season, which I believe is due to come out at the end of 2022. But the first and second seasons equally were just as strong as one another. And I would highly recommend checking out this show if you're a fan of DC villains in particular. Next up, we have a series of French films directed by Polish director Krzysztof Kieślowski, and that is the Three Colors trilogy, Three Colors Blue, White, and Red. I've only seen the first film, Blue, so far, and overall I thought it was okay. I didn't really connect with it like I was hoping to do so. These films were released under the label Artificial Eye and are French films with English subtitles, and I had read some really great reviews really on all three films. Three Colors Blue in particular, I thought was stunning in terms of the visuals and overall very evocative for the main plot being a widow struggling with the loss of her daughter and her husband, who was a composer. And I thought the character was kind of cliched in some ways, but very interesting for how kind of manipulative she was in some ways, and some other ways where she was trying to come across as a victim. And that was really what intrigued me most about her character, especially where she's trying to deny her past, when trying to focus on herself, trying to build her life back from the ground up with all the money that she has got, the riches and wealth that her husband managed to accomplish through his musical work. Very unique in that respect, but I just didn't really connect with her character. Felt that she was kind of closed off, which is understandable for what she has gone through, but yeah, just didn't really take to this film all that well. Apparently, the other two movies in the trilogy are much better. Three Colors White is supposedly a black comedy, which I'm kind of intrigued by. My sense of humor is particularly dark, so I'm sure this is something I will definitely appreciate. And then apparently, the final film, Three Colors Red, is the best film in the trilogy, so I'm excited to see what this one has to offer. But yeah, the Three Colors trilogy, I'll likely revisit this in a future update video just to feedback my thoughts. Really, I guess, on the trilogy as a whole once I've seen White and Red, so stay tuned for future videos to hear my thoughts on the other two films. Next up, we have another title I will more than likely be featuring in a future update video, that being Interstellar, directed by Christopher Nolan, which I've been recommended to watch this film countless times in various YouTube comments, as well as in person as well, and I'm intrigued to what this really has to offer. I don't really know too much about the film, admittedly, other than it's basically just a sci-fi film. It's nearly 3 hours long, which was kind of surprising. There's obviously a lot of depth going on with this, and I'm intrigued by the cast as well. So we shall see how we fare with this one in a future video. So that is Interstellar. And last up for the Blu-rays, we have the complete collection of The Future Diary, which is a series that my friend has loaned to me. From how much I enjoyed Cowboy Bebop, she recommended this show, saying that apparently it's quite a gritty and violent series overall, so I'm intrigued by the premise behind it, which is basically just predicting the future. And this box set in particular is absolutely stunning, a very nifty sort of hardback set, along with there being 2 Blu-ray cases included, which have 2 discs in each one, along with this fantastic art book as well. So really intrigued to see what this has to offer. Definitely something I'll be checking out as soon as I possibly can. So that is The Future Diary. Moving on to the DVDs, first up we have Creed 2, which I really enjoyed the first Creed film. I really appreciated how it continued the Rocky legacy and reinvented certain aspects of this film franchise. And the sequel is really no exception. It really does further enhance the character of Adonis Creed, portrayed phenomenally by Michael B. Jordan. And I really liked how this film was all the more personal for that character in relation to the villain aspect, where this harks back to the fourth Rocky film with Ivan Drago, portrayed by Dolph Lundgren, coming back into the picture, now with his son Victor being the opponent that Adonis must face in the ring. And I like how this kind of subverts and removes any sort of Cold War politics that were heavily relevant back in when the fourth Rocky film initially came out, and so this makes the fight all the more personal. And I really liked the sequences involving Stallone and Lundgren together, where the character of Rocky's basically denying what initially happened between the two characters, especially with the history that they have, and how Apollo Creed was sadly taken out in the ring, which was a very brutal scene from the fourth film.
If he dies, he dies.
Anyhow, I enjoyed this film for what it was. It was great to see the character of Ivan Drago expanded upon a little bit more, and I hope to see more from this franchise. So that is Creed 2. Next up, we have another boxing-themed film, Bleed for This, starring Miles Teller and Aaron Eckhart. This was kind of an alternative look to a Rocky-based film, being quite the inspirational story, which is based on a true story about a known boxer named Vinny, aka the Tasmanian Devil. And Teller playing that role, he ends up in a very unfortunate car accident and is told by medical professionals that he will never box again. His professional career is over. And understandably, this depresses the character of Vinny, who then begins in secret training with this absolutely god awful looking device wrapped around his head known as the halo, which is supposed to keep his head straight and heal his spinal column over a significant period of time. And so, in secret, with his personal trainer Kevin, played by Aaron Eckhart, we see the journey of the two basically try and rebuild Vinny's professional career of boxing. I really loved the deceitful side of the story paired with the tough love kind of arrangement between Kevin and Vinny. Overall, a very inspirational story. And if you're looking for a film that is kind of hinted at similar to the likes of Rocky, I'm sure you'll find something in this film to appreciate. So that is Bleed for This. Next up, we have another film that is based on a true story, and that is Shattered Glass, starring Hayden Christensen. I picked this up kind of out of morbid curiosity, wanting to see a film outside of the Star Wars prequels that starred Christensen,
Oh, I hate you.
and this did not disappoint at all. I would honestly say this is one of the best films I have watched this year thus far, and I absolutely love what Christensen brought to the table. I would argue and say that his strengths as an actor in the prequels was where he was trying to seem overly confident, and that was something that was very much brought to the table in this movie, where the character of Stephen Glass that he portrays, both in this film and in real life, was known for fabricating newspaper stories and lying about certain events that did not happen, just to try and get some form of mediated story out there to make him seem like a credible writer. And when people start picking holes in his stories, this is where things fall apart for him. And rather than admitting that he has been lying all this time and just coming clean, he starts lying more and more and more, which only digs the hole deeper of this hyperbole that he has summoned. And I absolutely love the struggles that the character goes through throughout this film, along with the way he interacts with those around him when he has been obviously caught out. And despite being caught out, he just will not stop lying. It's a fantastic story, was very well acted. I really enjoyed Rosario Dawson and Steve Zahn in particular, and I also really enjoyed the well-known Simpsons actor Hank Azaria playing quite a prominent role as like a mentor kind of figure in this movie as well. Definitely a film I would highly recommend. I was pleasantly surprised by this, and Christensen's acting was honestly flawless. I really enjoyed what he brought to the table. Next up, we have the Eminem movie 8 Mile, which I was pleasantly surprised by. I'm not really a big fan of Eminem. I respect him as an artist, and I do have a handful of his tracks on my personal playlist. Obviously, Lose Yourself, which was spawned from this film, being on there anyway, which I would definitely say is probably his best track up there, with one of my personal favorites being Sing for the Moment, which I really like. But yeah, this was overall a pleasant surprise, a very humble take on Eminem's claim to fame, with this being kind of an incarnation of the story behind him becoming the rap artist that we know him as today, with the character of Jimmy Rabbit being basically Eminem. Anyway, but the way he handles being an actor on screen, I really enjoyed his presence, and the soundtrack to this was overall very enjoyable. Lose Yourself obviously being the most prominent song from this, regardless. But yeah, a pleasant surprise, something that I didn't really anticipate checking out, but I'm glad that I did. So that is 8 Mile. Next up, we have a very bizarre film that was recommended to me, and that is My Dinner with Andre, which the original UK copy of this film is sadly out of print and varies in price between about £20–25. Kind of excessive, so I picked up this Korean import fairly cheap, and I gotta say, this was a very excruciatingly painful film to sit through. The reason being, the first sort of 5 minutes or so look at the character of Wally, played by Wallace Shawn, who is a struggling actor meeting his friend Andre for dinner, played by Andre Gregory. And the whole film is literally just a dinner conversation. The camera angles rarely sort of vary in what they're filming, and the whole thing is just one big elongated sort of conversation. And as interesting as the conversation was, I literally felt like this film would have worked just as a podcast. That's how I was looking at it. I must admit the content was interesting enough, especially looking at theatre from two different points of views that were kind of clashing throughout, where Wally is very much of the perspective of, with him being a struggling actor, that kind of the world owes him for trying to survive a profession that is almost rejecting him, whereas Andre is far more approachable about life in general, far more positive, and that seems to enrage Wally, which is where the conversation sort of stems onward throughout the film. An interesting perspective on a film, but I don't think I'll be watching this ever again. It was an experience. I'm glad I've seen it. It might be worth watching to some of you out there, but not really something I would recommend. This was for sure a bit of a struggle to sit through. Next up, we have The People versus Larry Flint, which was a very unique film experience. And I overall found this to be both a struggle and an absolute joy to sit through. It's a very fascinating story where Woody Harrelson really does give his all for the acting capabilities represented in this film. I really loved the sort of split kind of psyche where by the end he is almost completely out of his mind, where he is trying to split his life between his personal career of trying to essentially peddle pornography throughout the United States with the publication of Hustler magazine. He's trying to do that, which is kind of near and dear to him, with him kind of being entrepreneurial, trying to generate as much money and profit as possible, while also trying to balance the love of his life as well and his own personal relationship. And the way that is represented throughout the film, by the end, he is completely out of his mind. And this is brought on by various depraved moments of love and loss. Mainly, one of the most tragic sequences being where he is being represented by the lawyer character portrayed phenomenally by Edward Norton, and both Norton and Harrelson, their characters are gunned down by religious fanatics, and so that really does make this all the more powerful and compelling to sit through, where the character of Larry Flint is just going berserk insane, having been paralyzed permanently. What an absolutely tragic figure he represents by the end, and it's one that I will most certainly be rewatching sometime soon. So that is The People versus Larry Flint. Next up, we have another film starring Edward Norton, and that is Death to Smoochy, which is a very funny black comedy directed by Danny DeVito. And as well as starring Ed Norton, it also stars Robin Williams, who brought quite a sadistic character to the screen, where both Norton and Williams, their characters are competing to win a time slot on children's television, where they are both children's TV show hosts. and they are trying to basically one up one another and try and ruin each other's careers so the other can take over and flourish as their chosen character. And I thought the character on screen of Rainbow Randolph, played by Robin Williams, was hilarious to see him go from such a happy-go-lucky person to then be completely subdued into this very deceitful man who is going to all lengths to try and destroy such an innocent character in what Sheldon plays as Smoochy the Rhino, a very adorable sort of Barney the Dinosaur kind of figure. And the film in itself had some great memorable moments, my personal favorite being where Randolph tricks Sheldon into dressing up as Smoochy the Rhino for a live performance where he accidentally performs at a Nazi rally. I had to pause the film when that happened since it was just so unexpectedly funny and just such a sadistic moment. I really thought that was honestly one of the best scenes in the entire film. And the movie in itself, I would definitely recommend if you're into dark comedy and twisted kind of films. This would certainly be something that I would recommend checking out. So that is Death to Smoochy. Next up, we have a TV movie which I've wanted to add to my collection for a little while. This is Code of a Killer, starring one of my all-time favorite actors, John Sim, which I have sadly not checked out this film as of yet, but from the clips that I watched on YouTube, I was very intrigued to see what would actually happen in this film with the character of Dr. Alec Jeffries, played by Sim, discovering the significance of fingerprint DNA. And so it looked to be a very captivating story, and so I'll be watching this as soon as I possibly can, and I may feature this in a future update video. I would also love to do a video similar to what I did looking through the films that I own starring Edward Norton, looking through my collection of things relating to John Sim as an actor. There's still a few titles I would like to pick up before doing that kind of video, but it's definitely something on the card since I really do respect this man as an actor. So that is Code of a Killer. Next up, we have a handful of Studio Ghibli films, which I've never really checked out any of these kinds of films, but I'm really glad that I'm starting to get into these stories. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, I watched a few months ago, and this was a stunning film, very beautiful in terms of the enriching animation. The soundtrack was fantastic, and I loved the characters, with this being a post-apocalyptic film set where there's a war between humans and giant insects. Very strange premise, but had a lot of heart behind it. Very well animated, adorable looking characters, and very gruesome looking sort of insect characters on that note as well. And I'm not really one to collect numbered spines, but I did notice that this was the first in a sequence of numbered spine DVDs. And I'd picked up a bundle online of a couple of other films that I wanted to watch, the first of which being Spirited Away, which is number 13 in the Ghibli collection. I don't really know too much about this film, but one thing that was kind of intriguing to me was that this character supposedly was the inspiration behind Darth Nihilus from Knights of the Old Republic 2. But beyond that, know very little about this film, so I'm intrigued to see what this has to offer. Likewise with Princess Mononoke, where speaking of Star Wars, supposedly this is the Star Wars of these kind of animated features, so that intrigues me enough to check out this film anyway, and I'm sure I will appreciate this. Again, I will more than likely feature this in a future update video once I have checked it out, and I'm sure this won't be the last Studio Ghibli film I'll be collecting anytime soon. And to round off this update video, we have a couple of TV shows, beginning with Season 7 of Bob's Burgers, which I recently did do a video comparing this official Season 7 DVD release to a couple of fake bootlegs, which I sadly got stung with, of which, to give an update on that scenario, I thankfully did get my money back in the end, so happy days on that note. But it was great to kind of explore the sort of fake bootlegs and to kind of point out the significant differences between the DVD sets just to, I guess, spread some awareness. And again, on a similar note, it was fantastic to revisit this season. I really enjoyed it overall. The episode with the little meat man sort of stop motion I thought was adorable. The episode Fluise, which is the first episode on here, which I mentioned in that video, is one of my favorites. And one that I completely forgot about was the aquaticism episode, where the kids try and save a local aquarium by coming up with a fake religion known as aquaticism, where they claim that the aquarium is in fact a church and therefore it should be tax-free and should not be shut down. A very funny premise for an episode. I really want to grab some more of the Bob's Burgers DVD sets. They are sadly difficult to come by and for sure very expensive, but I'm hoping to fill those gaps in the collection at some point in the near future regardless. So that is Season 7 of Bob's Burgers. Next up, we have the complete series box set of Faulty Towers, which is the complete series of both seasons, including a bonus disc with some fantastic extras on there, with this being the complete remastered edition. There are some extra added bonuses on there, which I believe this was released for the 30th anniversary of the show. There you go. So John Cleese actually did some extra sort of bonus content looking at the series kind of retrospectively and provide a commentary on all 12 episodes. So definitely some intriguing bonus features on here. I've wanted to have this box set in the collection for a long time, and I'm glad to have finally picked this one up. And finally, for this update video, we have Volume 3 and Volume 4 of Batman the Animated Series, which I've been trying to get hold of these box sets for the longest time. I do have Volume 1 and Volume 2 already, but these particular sets were very difficult to get hold of in the UK, since they were never released over here. These are both Region 1 American exclusives, and therefore that makes them all the more expensive, which is kind of unfortunate. And so initially I was going to just resell Volumes 1 and 2 and just pick up the Blu-ray box set, which contains all the episodes, including the ones that are on both of these sets. But instead I did hold out, and I really wanted to get these sets anyway, since I love the artwork and the designs on both of these. They both contain some fantastic bonus features as well, and both of them are 4-disc DVD sets, just to give you an idea as to what the content is like on the inside. And so that completes my collection of Batman the Animated Series. Based on what I've watched of the show, I've only seen all of Volume 1, which I absolutely loved, kind of your typical sort of Saturday morning cartoon. And supposedly Volume 3 kind of concludes that portion of the series, and Volume 4 is its own thing with some form of continuity onward from the original animated show. I'm intrigued to see what direction this does go in regardless, and I'm hoping to review these DVD sets later down the line on the channel. So that's going to do it for my Blu-ray and DVD collection update for this month. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, be sure to leave me a like down below. Let me know in the comments if there's anything in particular you would like to see an individual review video of. And of course, for more content, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, DVD Review Studios.
Are you threatening me?